Hey everyone, this is Nick from the Botch Pit, and today we're going to be discussing World of Darkness Innocence, a supplement for the Chronicles of Darkness. World of Darkness Innocence was initially released on April 30th, 2008, making it a first edition book. As of this moment, there has been slight rumors of adapting it to second edition. However, nothing official has been stated in regards to it. Just to clarify, as a foreword when discussing this book, we're going to give a historical context of this setting as it applies to 1E and how to implement its works into your 2E stories. As it pertains to Chronicles of Darkness, Innocence refers to child characters, specifically those between the ages of 7 and 12 years old, that exist within the World of Darkness setting. You see, it's adults that explain those things that go bump in the night, but it's the children who truly know about the monsters in their closet or under their bed. Those imaginary friends that tell them what to do. Those unclouded by the old, crooked house at the bottom of the street. The monsters. Goosebumps. Are You Afraid of the Dark? Ah, Real Monsters. The Addams Family. We'll get more into these examples at the final section of this video. Just as a warning, this video is going to be a nostalgia bomb for most, and I can't wait to uncover that which you've probably buried deep in your childhood. The rules depicted in this book, however, can extend upwards as well, and I have used this as base material for much of my teenage characters. The great thing about this book is the insight it gives you into thinking about characters at certain ages. We'll touch more on this later. Complexity. Before we really dive deep into this book, I'm going to reiterate what the authors discuss throughout the book. It's important to respect children for who and what they are, and what they are is fragile in the World of Darkness. Take this message to heart as we go through all of this. The place for children in horror is a difficult topic. Nobody is comfortable seeing children harmed, whether they are in the clutches of some monster or something much, much worse. Children are often victimized in the real world, and bringing that grim tone into a play session might not be something every player is comfortable with. However, there are few things in this world so helpless, yet so full of potential, as a child. Themes and mood. Contextually, this book released after Changeling the Lost and prior to Hunter the Vigil. One of the discussed moods is a game of light and dark, a game of innocence in a murky, dangerous world. This is just a stone's throw away from the entire analogy about Hunter the Vigil being the light that shines into the World of Darkness. Theme: Fragility. Innocence is a game about fragility. Human beings are born years before we can keep ourselves alive. And even at 9 years of age, a child is still too weak to protect themselves. This being said, how are kids going to stand up to the horrors of the World of Darkness? Fragility, as it interplays with this concept, is directed specifically at the hands of the storyteller. Players should be placed in situations in which the characters must conquer their fears, but can do so. Mood, wonder, and fear. Despite the horror of the World of Darkness, there's a certain wonder to it all. Magical places, things unseen to the normal everyday person, the supernatural. The idea of not knowing the dangers and repercussions of one's actions, but also not understanding the advantages it may bring, is magnificent and terrifying. Truly wonderful the mind of a child is. The wonder and fear extends well beyond first contact with the supernatural, and it only ends when the characters decided they have seen enough. Innocence-inspired genres. For obvious reasons, the particular film noir genre of story usually set for World of Darkness is deeply inappropriate for an Innocence game. Fortunately, a number of offshoot genres do exist for use in conjunction with Innocence and the World of Darkness in general. Dark modern fairy tales and traditional fairy tales. Fairy tales are, by their very nature, one of the most proper dramatic settings for child protagonists. For many years, the only place to find adaptations of fairy tales and their themes were in the films of Walt Disney, and those works had a habit of downplaying or outright ignoring the more disturbing aspects of the stories on which they were based. Real fairy tales have edges on them. They are, after all, cautionary tales meant to teach children moral lessons, and the unpleasant, life-altering, sometimes fatal, consequences of transgressing against community mores, social expectations, and basic common sense. In their original forms, fairy tales don't shy away from the themes of sexuality, violence, and cruelty, as they're teaching a cautionary comment on the darker side of the human condition. Easily the single most common reoccurring theme in fairy tales is that every choice and action has a consequence, even and perhaps especially for children. Young adult horror novels and short stories. During the mid-80s to mid-90s, author R.L. Stine's works flooded the young adult fiction market under the series titles of Goosebumps and Fear Street, and many of his contemporaries, and some would say imitators, came with it. His Goosebumps series works are the perfect representation of how to introduce supernatural elements to child characters with a light horror theme within the target age group for an Innocence Chronicle. His Fear Street series was marketed toward the older end of the Innocence age spectrum and ramped the horror and danger factor somewhat higher, as well as introducing certain elements of the thriller genre, such as non-supernatural antagonists menacing plucky babysitters and their young charges. Other reference sources could be crafted from classic sci-fi, such as The Twilight Zone. Many themes for these and other stories within the genre borrow thematic conventions from the bits of fairy tales, mainly pertaining to violence and sexuality and the more unpleasant aspects of the human condition to get their points across. One of the most common themes in young adult horror, much like grown-up horror novels, is don't call something up that you can't put back down. This is easily one of the best hooks to embed in an Innocence Chronicle, due to the very simple fact that children are curious by nature and often do things that they're told not to do for any number of reasons, good, bad, or rankly foolish. Young adult modern fantasy / semi-modern fantasy. Young adult fantasy is to the 2000s as what young adult horror was to the 1980s and 1990s. The protagonists of these novels are typically within the range of an Innocence Chronicle and are involved in some fantastical story, complete with supernatural villains, magical threats to the world, and age-old prophecies awaiting to be fulfilled. Although lighter in tone than the World of Darkness, it isn't by much. Think Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. One of the most common themes to be found in modern fantasy is that of children growing up in the midst of terrible things. Growing up itself is a morally ambiguous undertaking, much less while trying to deal with a supernatural menace. This is a theme to use for chronicles, specifically revolving around how the protagonists change in accordance with the weird and fantastic circumstances in which they find themselves embroiled, and how those changes propel them forward or hold them back from becoming the people they ultimately will be in the future. While we're on the topic of themes, there are, of course, themes that do not derive from fictional sources. You know where I'm going with this, and my advice is don't. The book dissuades you from doing it, and I'm here to say don't even let it cross your mind. Portraying child characters. Putting themselves into the mind of a child can be quite difficult for most role players that have been far removed from that stage of life. This creates some fairly significant problems when it comes to accurately developing and portraying a child character in-game, specifically the tendency to overdevelop and underdevelop certain aspects of childhood. World of Darkness Innocence helps give fundamental general age-related guidelines for storytellers to reference when assisting their players in developing the perspective and personalities of their child characters. Jean Piaget, who was a Swiss psychologist known for his work on child development, and the stages he created is used as a basis for portraying these characters in the book. Everything stated in this section was drafted directly from the book, and in my opinion, this is where the book shines its best in modern 2E terms. Age 7. According to Piaget's stages of cognitive development, children at the age of 7 are at the end of the pre-operational stage. By this age, children are presumed to have fully and completely developed their sensory and motor capabilities. Most children have either completed or are in the process of completing their next stage of psychological function development by now, logical but inadequate mental operations. Aspects of the psychological function development include symbolic functioning, centration, intuitive thought, egocentrism, inability to conserve, and animism. In regards to innocence, 7-year-olds are the most immature of the game's target group. They behave illogically and irrationally, according to adult standards, though their behavior may very well be internally consistent according to the way they perceive and interact with the world. Most 7-year-olds are extremely self-centered and lack much of the way of empathy for others. They can be both cruel and kind without fully understanding the impact their behavior has on others. They are capable of reasoning within limits and intuitively grasping abstract concepts without fully comprehending them. Ages 8 to 11. According to Piaget, this general age group falls into the concrete operational stage. These ages are characterized by an increasingly appropriate, complex, and sophisticated grasp of a logical thought process. Aspects of the psychological function development include seriation, classification, decentering, reversibility, conservation, and the elimination of egocentrism. Children in this stage of development are generally defined as preteens, and as they age, their changes in personal perspective are usually defined as a greater grasp of and appreciation for the real nature of the world. They tend to have more realistic fears, fed by a superior understanding of how the world affects them in their lives, more realistic expectations in terms of punishments and rewards, as well as goals for the future, and more realistic thoughts and actions in general. They often have a greater tendency toward personal independence derived from a more developed sense of self and individual identity, as well as a developing sense of personal responsibility that is often encouraged by their parents, older siblings, peers, and other adult authority figures. Age 12. According to Piaget, age 12 is the start of the formal operational stage, the fourth and final stage of cognitive development. It is characterized by the acquisition and maturation of the ability to think abstractly, reason logically, and draw both correct and incorrect conclusions based on available information. At this stage, a young adult is capable of understanding abstract emotions and concepts, moral shades of gray, logical proofs, and complex values. The rapid changes in biology occasioned by the onset of puberty are most definitely a factor in both cognitive development and general behavior. This is still considered a preteen stage, but is the oldest and most matured of the preteen ages, the age most likely to possess some knowledge of human sexuality, increased responsibility for the care and well-being of younger children, and a somewhat more sophisticated worldview, encouraged by educators and other adults. This is, to put it mildly, an awkward age, a transitional period between pure childhood and young adulthood, often made even more difficult by personal fears about growing up and an increasing awareness of peer pressure to conform to others' expectations, just as one's own sense of self is truly beginning to flower. Quick checklist. As a checklist, some things to initially consider when storytelling child characters is that 1. They tire easily and don't have the same endurance as adults in regards to lack of food, sleep, etc. 2. People notice when kids go missing, unlike when adults go missing. It can be said that other adults will step in if they see children in trouble eventually. 3. Kids don't have the same education that adults do, and that's incredibly important to remember as both player and storyteller. 4. Horror always includes loss. Often that's measured in flesh and blood, but for child characters, that should be measured in loss of innocence. You can't go home again vibe. Danger and violence. There are many sources of danger to children in the world, even before attaching the supernatural elements of the world of darkness. Here is just a general overview of the elements that can contribute in the story. In the book, they go into very minute details of how each source can mechanically be affected. For this overview, and also not wanting to go rules heavy on a slightly outdated system, here are the basic ideas behind each one. If you want to go get lost in the sauce about rulings, definitely check out these systems as a guide. Violence. Innocent stories are generally geared toward escaping combat, rather than winning it. It's not that kids aren't capable of violence, either against adults or against each other, but the consequences of actually committing said violence are so much worse. Adults who experience it can be marked for a very long time, but somehow everyone, however unfairly, expects an adult to cope and to understand what they have done and experienced. Kids very often don't understand the real implications of what happens to them or of what they do, and not all kids really understand death. The most important thing to remember when children are involved is that it takes a lot for a kid to actually get into the kind of fight that might result in someone getting seriously hurt. Oftentimes, between the aggressors, one side backs down before anyone gets hurt, and when people do get hurt, the results are often swift and tragic. Faced with a monster, whether human or supernatural, a child's first reaction is to try to get away, however they can. One moment can blight a life. One act can end a childhood. Helplessness. One of the scariest things anyone can experience is helplessness. For a kid, it's worse and much more common. Kids spend a great deal of their early lives being at the mercy of adults. Escape. Kids are incredibly difficult to catch. A kid presented the opportunity to escape will probably desperately try to get out of the way of harm by wriggling under tables and chairs, diving between legs to avoid being hurt. There is a set of rules included in Innocence that dictates this mechanically. You declare at the start of the turn that your character is dodging, and you double their defense trait for the rest of the turn. You also apply a bonus of 1 for every point your character's size trait is under 5 when fighting a larger opponent. This operates a bit outside the normal initiative rules, and so a few additional factors must be taken into account. It doesn't have to be your character's turn when you declare that they're dodging. The only rule is that they can't have done anything else that turn. Again, if more than one person is after your character, you subtract 1 from the new defense total for every attacker beyond the first. The only other thing that your character can do in a turn where they're dodging is to move up to their speed. If they've already been attacked once or more when you declare that they're dodging, you only get to double your character's reduced defense trait. You can still elect to spend a point of willpower to add 2 to the total, wherever it is at that point against a single attack. Survival. An adult can go several days without water and even longer without food. Children are more susceptible to the lack of water and food, both mentally and physically. After 24 hours without water or without food, a child character suffers a -1 penalty on all actions. If the character is without both food and water, the penalty is -2. This penalty is not a physical one at first, but psychological. Even a few tiny morsels of food and sips of water are enough to convince the child that they are not, at this very moment, starving to death. Disease. Disease is a scary thing to a child. One day you're having a grand time out splashing in puddles until your feet get wet or someone sneezes on you and then you die. Of course, this is not the usual course of events, but to a young child, it all makes about that much sense. An older child might have a significantly more advanced understanding of germ theory, but even so, all a kid can do is grin, bear the shots, and hope for the best. In the world of darkness, new and exotic diseases do crawl out of the woodwork, so keep this in mind. Drugs. The message that kids are supposed to get about drugs is, just say no. Unfortunately, that message that actually reaches their ears is a lot more muddled and confusing. Adults have a wide array of drugs at their disposal. Coffee in the morning, cigarettes for breaks, alcohol to wind down in the evening, and those are just some of the legal ones. The medicine chest is full of muscle relaxants, pain pills, pills to calm jangled nerves, pills to keep you on an even keel, pills so you don't have to eat your vegetables. It's no wonder a kid might feel the urge to experiment. The book lists a quick overview of some common types of drugs and the effects they have on child characters. Alcohol, marijuana, hallucinogens, heroin, and cocaine is a hell of a drug. Electrocution. Don't stick a fork in the electrical outlet. Don't play outside in a thunderstorm. Don't piss on the third rail. Electrocution automatically causes a set amount of bashing damage per turn of exposure. If the harm from electricity is caused by a constant current, the shocked character might have to fight to escape. Electricity causes muscle contractions, which might prevent the character from removing themselves from danger. Explosives. Children play with explosives all the time. The tiny little child-sized bombs come in bright, shiny packaging, decorated so alluring that the sour warning messages on how to use the devices safely are easily ignored. Even the pretty sparkler, not an explosive, but a fun playtime incendiary device, burns at temperatures of 1800 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter, and these are toys for children. The book talks about additional explosives, fireworks and otherwise, that characters may come across and the faults and advantages of doing so. Falling. Kids climb trees and fall out of them. They climb walls and fall off. They lean way out of windows and fall out. Kids fall a lot on their own. Unfortunately, sometimes they are also pushed. All damage taken from a fall is bashing damage, unless the character falls on something sharp, like broken glass or a fence, causing lethal damage. Falling at terminal velocity also causes lethal damage. Fatigue. Staying awake to watch the creature feature in black and white in the middle of the night is fun. Staying awake because something keeps scratching at the window, or to ward off the monster that wants to steal your little sister, is not fun at all. Children have a much harder time than adults staying awake, in large part because they require more sleep to be healthy and well adjusted. A child can slide by on minimal sleep for a night or two, but it will show in their mood. Even one night without any sleep at all can turn a child into a monster themselves. Fire. Campfires, kitchen stoves, playing with matches, even the Bunsen burner at school. These are all ways your character can be burned. The most serious fire a child is likely to encounter is a house fire, doubly horrifying as they must escape and then watch as the house goes up in smoke. Fire automatically inflicts lethal damage per turn of exposure. No attack roll is required. A larger, hotter fire causes more damage, described by different factors in the book. Poisons and toxins. Poisons and toxins cover a broad territory, from a rattlesnake's bite to the noxious cleaners found under the kitchen sink. A poison might make a character feel sick, and a toxin might make them feel pain, but both carry the potential to be life-threatening. A poison or toxin is introduced into the victim's system by a particular delivery method, depending on the substance in question. The 4 delivery methods are injection, ingestion, inhalation, and touch. Once the poison has been delivered into the victim's system, it automatically inflicts damage, usually lethal, but some poisons, like a knockout gas, could cause bashing damage instead, equal to its toxicity level. Temperature extremes. Exposure to extreme environmental conditions, both heat and cold, can kill an unprotected child. Even worse, the effects of both heat stroke and hypothermia both include confusion and hallucinations, so the child may not even realize that they are in grave danger. Hypothermia occurs when the body's core temperature drops below the normal 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. It does not have to be brutally cold for this to happen. Most hypothermia deaths occur when the weather is below 30 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, just warm enough for someone without survival training to think, it's not so bad out. The addition of water to chilly temperatures is extremely dangerous, as water carries away body heat much faster than air. Heat stroke occurs when the body is unable to cool itself and the core temperature rises, up to a serious 106 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat stroke can occur when temperatures rise above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember that the temperature in enclosed spaces, like a car, can rise much faster than the outside temperature. Under normal outdoor conditions, a character will not suffer heat stroke as long as they can drink enough water to keep their body cool. If water is not available, the character begins to suffer from heat stroke long before they take damage from deprivation. Innocence character creation. What's incredibly neat and strange about World of Darkness Innocence is that in regards to character creation, Innocence has all the materials, including the base rules of 1E, to make it act as a standalone book. Should you want to play straight Innocence, you could use what's in the rulebook and it has everything you need to run it. For this section, we're going to examine how to build a character in the framework of what would operate with 2nd edition. We want to make sure you all get something to take away with this video versus something that you can just read. Assets and faults. Every Innocence character comes into play with one dominant asset and one dominant fault, chosen during character creation. Chronicles of Darkness players would recognize this as being mechanically similar to Virtue and Vice, they just go by a different name. The book even states that this can be interchanged. Attributes. Attributes function the same way as the core rules in the format of 5, 4, and 3. Skills. As a rule of thumb, child characters have fewer skill points than adult characters do. As a reminder, this would be the mental, physical, and social skill allotments. Adult characters would typically have 11 points for their primary skill, 7 points for their secondary, and 4 points for their tertiary, as well as 3 specialty skills to take. Within this book, it's slightly different. Children aged 7 have 6 points in their primary, 4 in their secondary, and 2 in their tertiary, with 1 specialty. Children age 8 have 7 points in their primary, 4 in their secondary, 2 in their tertiary, and 1 in their specialty. Children age 9 have 7 points in primary, 4 in their secondary, 3 in their tertiary, and 1 in their specialty. Age 10 has 8 points in their primary, 5 in their secondary, 3 in their tertiary, and 2 in their specialties. Age 11 has 8 points in primary, 5 in secondary, 3 in tertiary, 2 in specialties. Children age 12 have 9 points in their primary, 5 in their secondary, 3 in their tertiary, and 2 in their specialties. Teens have 10 points in their primary, 6 in their secondary, 4 in their tertiary, and 2 in their specialties. But what do you do if all your characters are different ages? Do you nerf some people and buff others? Within this book, the authors even state that this can be adjusted to what the storyteller sees fit to give them, especially when working in this given scenario. No one should really be taking deficits for making a younger character when you're all playing the same game. Merits. Innocent characters have access to special merits, or additional dots and merits that adults' characters can't take. Here's a list of those unique to these characters. Mental, Ego Boost, 2 dots. Mental Prodigy, 2 dots. Prize Possession, 1 dot. Trivia Hound, 4 dots. Physical, Fighting Style Karate for Kids, 1 to 3 dots. Fighting Style, Playground Dog Pile, 1 to 3 dots. Fresh Start, 1 to 3 dots. Hard Head, 2 dots. Physical Prodigy, 1 dot. Tiny, 1 dot. Tough, 1 to 2 dots. Social Merits, Deep Pockets, 2 dots. Guardian, 1 to 3 dots. Guardian Angel, 4 dots. Odd Jobs, 1 dot. Pet, 1 to 3 dots. Social Prodigy, 1 dot. Team Player, 2 dots. Size. Human children and young adults are considered to be size 4. Human teens/adults of 13 years or older are considered to be size 5. Speed. Derived traits. Strength plus dexterity plus species factor. For example, 4 for humans between the ages of 7 and 12. Now that was for 1E. In 2E, they actually eliminated species factor for all character sheets, so it would just be strength plus dexterity, the same as normal humans. Optional trait. Character flaws. Flaws are optional traits that allow a player to choose defects for their character. Flaws can be selected during character creation, but it's possible that events in the story might cause a character to require one as well. These include mental flaws, physical flaws, and social flaws that the book presents. Equipment. The things kids carry include toys, cosmetics, personal care, electronic devices, depending on story, weapons, school supplies, drugs, legal like inhalers or otherwise, contraband, money, clothing, food, or other miscellaneous materials. Transportation. World of Darkness Innocence goes into detail on the different stats of transportation vehicles kids would have access to. These include bikes, skateboards, scooters, motorcycles, cars of different makes and sizes, SUVs and pickup trucks, 18-wheelers, rig only, and buses. Child characters and their development in the story. The single most defining element of being a child is that they grow up, and as such, it should be one of the most important elements of a chronicle. What this means is simple. The characters introduced in the beginning of the story will not be the same characters at the completion. They will experience things that will change them, mature them, and in many ways, open their eyes and remove the innocence that they had in the beginning. Some characters naturally prove to be more resistant to these changes, just as some people are more resistant to those changes in real life. Some characters will be more susceptible to change wrought by their circumstances or by forces from outside themselves. Character development issues to keep in mind include, but are not limited to, management of personal trauma. Children manage and process traumatic experiences differently from adults. Many children who experience the sort of traumas associated with supernatural events in the world of darkness could very well suffer from such psychological difficulties as post-traumatic stress disorder, which is characterized in children by reenactment of their experiences during play or through nightmares, lacking any specific or recognizable content. Children grow up in a way. Most people don't begin forming emotionally and psychologically during friendships until late adolescence at the earliest, and most often in early childhood, once they've gone away to college or entered into the workforce, and begin encountering adult peers with whom they have things in common, such as shared interests or work. It's not impossible for people to know each other from early childhood and remain lifelong friends, but in the modern world, very few people successfully do so. Even with modern technological advances to facilitate communication, many people can't be bothered to keep in touch. People change. It's an unalterable fact of life. Most people are not interested in exactly the same things they were interested in when they were children. The inevitable process of becoming an adult wears at everyone, taking with it innocence, the naive beliefs that we forged as children, our friends, our families, and in some ways, ourselves. Adult characters derived from the child characters of an Innocence Chronicle should contain at least some of the same aspects of personality and characterization they possessed prior, but they should also be significantly and fairly rational differences from the characters they used to be as well. Some changes will be significant, while others will likely echo aspects of the children they used to be. Converting child characters to adults. These dramatic processes and character exploration issues should be encouraged, as well as whatever group dynamics develop, to produce a group of characters that complete the transition from innocence to adults within the world of darkness. Their adventures may continue past the point of their childhood. Character progression is one of my favorite elements to explore in a story, and World of Darkness Innocence allows for child characters to grow into adults to continue the story at a later point in life. This is another shining moment of this book for me. Not all Innocence Chronicles will, of course, lead to continuations featuring adult versions of the characters, but the option to do so certainly exists, should everyone wish to pursue it. The simplest way to do this is to create the characters anew, using the system shown in the Chronicles of Darkness rulebook. However, World of Darkness Innocence offers a conversion system inside of it in order to accomplish this as well. Step 1. Concept. Consider how the character has changed during the intervening years between the players last met, paying special attention to whether the characters have kept in touch. An experience with the supernatural might just be a strong enough impetus to keep the group in contact. Then again, it might be interesting for each player to decide individually how their character has changed and adapted without presenting much in the way of explaining and forcing the other players to figure out what has changed. Beyond the question of contact, think about experiences. How have the characters moved on from their experiences together? Degrees, careers, family, etc. They might have also buried parents, friends, or lovers, suffered injuries and terrible losses, and be at the end of their metaphorical ropes when the characters all find one another again. And, of course, consider the supernatural. Have the characters seen anything strange in the years since their last meetings? Have they continued to pursue the unexplained, or do they just ignore it, like most of the adults in the World of Darkness? If that's the case, seeing the other characters will rattle the characters terribly. How will they cope with that? At this point, the book recommends adapting the asset and fault to virtue and vice to reflect the maturation process. Step 2. Attributes. Attributes do not change. If you wish to shuffle your character's attribute ratings, however, you may do so depending on how the characters have matured. Step 3. Skills and specialties. Subtract 1 dot from each skill your character possesses, to a minimum of 1 dot. This isn't to suggest that children lose abilities as they get older. It merely simulates the growing complexity of information that skills represent for adults, and the efforts that adults must put into maintaining these skills. Note that characters still, though, keep the basic knowledge and ability that they had in their youth. Specialties don't necessarily change, though they can if the player wishes. It's often appropriate. Our interests change as they grow more sophisticated. When updating to the Chronicles of Darkness Mortal template, then study should be removed entirely. Any dots in study should be put into academics and/or science. Step 4. Merits. Any merits that are no longer applicable are lost. Deep Pockets, for instance, disappears once a character is no longer dependent on their parents. Pets probably don't survive with a character into adulthood. The childhood fighting styles are lost, but if the character has kept up their training, they can use experience points to purchase dots and the brawl skill to reflect this. Actually, if you study both Innocence and Chronicles of Darkness closely, there are merits that actually would reflect the same abilities, but older. As a side note, the teenage characters I make, I use merits from Innocence, and when they hit maturity, I switch them over to Chronicles. It's actually really fun to do. Step 5. Morality and triggers. Morality doesn't necessarily change, though it can be brought up with experience points. They just call it integrity now in Chronicles of Darkness. Triggers are assumed to have faded, though they can be converted into derangements. Step 6. Update traits. If the character's skills total less than 1174 with 3 specialties, add dots to the appropriate categories to bring them up to this total, and specialties to a maximum of 3. If the character has fewer than 7 merit dots, choose merits to bring the total to 7. Physical skills now include drive, and social skills now include persuasion. Step 7. Experience points. Add experience points to your character using the following formula. 20 plus the number of years that transpired between the age of the characters at the end of the Innocence Chronicle and the age of the characters at the beginning of the new adult-oriented chronicle. These points can be used to buy up any trait that the player wishes. Step 8. Update advantages. Depending on which traits have been raised or altered, speed, health, willpower, defense, and initiative might have been changed. In addition, size increases to 5, even if the character was tiny. Also note, characters with a giant merit do not change in size, they're still size 5. The merit dots spent for giant are reassigned back in step 5. Innocence vs. the World of Darkness, or what I'm calling the case for child characters in the World of Darkness. The final section of World of Darkness Innocence discusses the first 5 different game lines: Vampire the Requiem, Werewolf the Forsaken, Mage the Awakening, Promethean the Created, and Changeling the Lost, and how they pertain to running them with Innocence. These descriptions include different potential ways of including allies as well as antagonists. For this section, I wanted to explore how Innocence, or characters to be shown displaying actions portrayed in Innocence, can be run in different game lines using modern media examples. This is something that couldn't be done for the book for obvious reasons, and I feel by explaining it this way, it makes the book stand out so much more. I found it incredibly enriching to go back through some of my more favorite films, video games, and so on, and identify just how many child characters there were, and really reflect on the decision as to why they were put there in the first place. It made me appreciate why they were included in a story such as this so much more. Most often the question you receive when you want to run Innocence or talk about Innocence is, who wants to play a child character? That is really like the number one question that someone always says when talking about this book. And I think people forget just how important they can be to a story. And I hope that this section helps to open your eyes to perhaps playing one in the future. The intention of this is to incite that nostalgia and make it apparent how important child characters can be. Vampire the Requiem. Adventure time, 2010 to 2018. Adventure Time follows the adventures of a boy named Finn the Human and his best friend and adopted brother, Jake the Dog, in the post-apocalyptic land of Oo, which is inhabited by all types of wondrous companions and creatures. Marceline the Vampire Queen is a fun-loving, 1,000-year-old vampire queen that takes on the appearance of an 18 to 21-year-old teenager. However, unlike a traditional vampire who needs to drink blood to survive, Marceline eats the color red. She is also an avid musician who plays an electric bass that she made from her family's heirloom battle axe. The Lost Boys, 1987. Teenage brothers Michael and Sam moved to a small town in Northern California with their mother. While the younger brother Sam befriends geeky comic book nerds Edward and Alan, the older brother Michael soon falls for Star, who turns out to be enthralled to David, leader of a local gang of vampires. What We Do in the Shadows, 2019. A look into the daily, or rather nightly, lives of three vampires, Nandor the Rentless, Laszlo, and Nadja, who've lived together for over 100 years on Staten Island. Also living in the vampire household is Guillermo, Nandor's familiar, and Colin Robinson, an energy vampire. During the course of their nights, vampiric children are used as hilarious, yet also horrific, comic relief. Werewolf the Forsaken. Adventure Time, 2010 to 2018. Wait, again? Lumpy space princess looks like a purple cloud with a yellow star on her forehead and speaks in a somewhat deep, nasal voice. She can infect someone with the lumps, turning them into a lumpy space denizen if she bites a person with her sharp teeth. As she says, it's like werewolf rules. Princess Mononoke, 1997. In the 14th century, the harmony that exists between humans, animals, and gods begins to crumble. The protagonist, young Ashitaka, is infected by an animal attack and seeks a cure from the deer-like god Shishigami. In his travels, he sees humans ravaging the earth, bringing down the wrath of wolf god Moro and her human companion, Princess Mononoke. His attempts to broker peace between her and the industrialized humans brings only conflict. Silver Bullet, 1985. When a series of unexplained murders occurs in the normally quiet town of Tarker's Mill, the residents decide to hunt down the killer. However, many of these vigilantes end up dead, and those who don't are no closer to finding an assailant. When a young wheelchair-bound boy named Marty encounters a werewolf one night, the pieces begin to come together. Along with his sister and Uncle Red, Marty begins a mission to capture the werewolf once and for all. Teen Wolf, 2011. Scott McCall is a high school student living in the fictional California town of Beacon Hills. After Scott is bitten by an alpha werewolf the night before his second year of high school, his once ordinary life is drastically changed as he tries to balance his normal life while protecting his supernatural active hometown. Mage the Awakening. The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, 2018. A dark coming-of-age story derived from Sabrina the Teenage Witch that traffics in horror and the occult. Sabrina Spellman wrestles to reconcile her dual nature, half witch, half mortal, while standing against the evil forces that threaten her, her family, and the daylight world humans inhabit. Harry Potter, 1997. Harry Potter learns on his 11th birthday that he is the orphan son of two powerful wizards and has begun to demonstrate magical powers of his own. He is summoned from his life as an unwanted child to become a student at Hogwarts, an English boarding school for wizards. There, he meets several friends who become his closest allies and help him discover the truth about the wizarding world. Hocus Pocus, 1993. After moving to Salem, Massachusetts, teenager Max Dennison explores an abandoned house with his sister Danny and their new friend Allison. After dismissing a story Allison tells as superstitious, Max accidentally frees a coven of evil witches, the Sanderson sisters, who used to live in the house. Now, with the help of a magical cat named Binks, the kids must steal the witch's book of spells to stop them from becoming immortal. The Witch, 2015. And that's witch with two V's. In 1630 New England, panic and despair envelops a farmer, his wife, and their children when their youngest son, Samuel, suddenly vanishes. The family blames Thomasin, the oldest daughter, who was watching the boy at the time of his disappearance. With superstition and paranoia mounting, two siblings, Mercy and Jonas, suspect Thomasin of witchcraft, testing the clan's faith, loyalty, and love to one another. The Witches, 1990. While staying at a hotel in England with his grandmother Helga, young Luke inadvertently spies on a convention of witches. The Grand High Witch reveals a plan to turn all children into mice through a magical formula and test it on Luke. Now, with the help of Helga and the hotel manager, Mr. Stringer, Luke the Mouse must fight back against the witches. Promethean the Created. Adventure Time, 2010 to 2018. Wait, again? The final example of Adventure Time is probably my most favorite on this list. The Earl of Lemongrab is the high-strung, overzealous, obnoxious, paranoid, stubborn ruler of the Earldom of Lemongrab and the possible heir to the Candy Kingdom. He is the scientific creation of Princess Bubblegum and the first of her experiments to go wrong. Throughout the course of Adventure Time, Lemongrab goes through his own pilgrimage, even committing lacuna on Lemongrab 2, and the generative act to make a host of subjects, and finds his own acceptable inner peace by the end. Flubber, 1997. Professor Philip Brainard is experimenting with new kinds of energy, and he thinks this project will save struggling Medford College, where his girlfriend, Sarah, is president. But when he discovers a lively, rubber-like substance dubbed flubber, he gets so excited, he absent-mindedly misses his own wedding. Sarah dumps him, so he tries to use his discovery to win her back. But unfortunately, the mischievous flubber seems to have a mind of its own. Frankenweenie, 2012. Young Victor Frankenstein is a science nerd and outsider at school, but he does have one good friend, his dog, Sparky. That is, until tragedy strikes, and Sparky shuffles off this mortal coil. Victor is heartbroken, but his science teacher gives him an idea of how to jolt Sparky back to life. The experiment is successful, and all goes well until Victor's fellow students steal his secret and use it to resurrect other dead animals with monstrous consequences. Haunting Ground, 2005. The story follows Fiona Belly, a young woman who wakes up in a dungeon of a castle after being involved in a car accident. She quickly befriends a white shepherd, Huey, and begins to explore the castle with his aid to seek a means of escape and unravel the mysteries of it and its inhabitants. Changeling the Lost. Avatar: The Last Airbender, 2005 to 2008. 12-year-old Aang, the current avatar and last survivor of his nation, the Air Nomads, along with his friends Katara, Sokka, and later Toph, strive to end the Fire Nation's war against the other nations of the world. As a special note, Zuko's story is riddled for inspiration for Changeling the Lost. Coraline, 2009. A girl named Coraline discovers a secret door while exploring her new home, behind which lies an alternate world that closely mirrors her own, but, in many ways, is better. It's almost a perfect world, until the other mother and the rest of her parallel family try to keep her there forever. Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, 2004 to 2009. Sometimes imaginary friends get lost, or kids outgrow them, and that's why Madam Foster started Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. When kids dream up pals, they come to life, and the house is filled with diverse characters waiting to be reunited or adopted to new kids. This show focuses on building friendships and the importance of friends. Pan's Labyrinth, 2006. It's 1944, and the Allies have invaded Nazi-held Europe. In Spain, a troop of soldiers led by Captain Vidal, a murdering sadist, are sent to a remote forest to flush out the rebels. With Vidal is his new wife Carmen and her daughter from a previous marriage, 11-year-old Ophelia. Ophelia witnesses her stepfather's sadistic brutality and is drawn into a magical world of mythical beings. Pan's Labyrinth. Spirited Away, 2002. 10-year-old Chihiro moves with her parents to a new home in the Japanese countryside. After taking a wrong turn down a wooded path, Chihiro and her parents discover an amusement park with a stall containing an assortment of food, which Chihiro's parents begin eating and then transform into pigs. In this supernatural realm, Chihiro encounters a host of characters and endures labor in the bathhouse for spirits, awaiting a reunion with her parents. Hunter the Vigil. Aliens, 1986. After floating in space for 57 years, Lieutenant Ripley's shuttle is found by a deep space salvage team. Upon arriving at LV-426, the Marines find only one survivor, a 9-year-old girl named Newt. Little do they all know that they are no match for the hundreds of aliens that have invaded the colony. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 1997 to 2003. Buffy Summers is a slayer, one in a long line of young women chosen for a specific mission to seek out and destroy vampires, demons, and other forces of darkness. Her battles with evil are frequent, since Sunnydale, where Buffy and friends live, sits atop a gateway to the realm of the demons. Invader Zim, 2001. Against all odds, the inept space invader Zim succeeds in setting up a base on Earth and infiltrating human culture, posing as a human child as he plots the planet's downfall. Only Dib, Zim's arch-nemesis obsessed with the paranormal, recognizes that Zim is an alien, and of course, nobody believes his claims. Jackie Chan Adventures, 2000 to 2005. Archaeologist and martial artist Jackie Chan opposes evil forces hunting powerful magical artifacts with the help of his wise uncle and plucky niece Jade. Johnny Bravo, 1997. Johnny Bravo is a sunglass-wearing, muscular, conceited narcissist and dim-witted, self-proclaimed womanizer with a pompadour. Johnny's companions are Bunny Mama Bravo, his lively, caring, extroverted mother, Little Susie, a talkative and intelligent little girl from the neighborhood who likes to annoy Johnny, although he rarely remembers her name, and Karo Krasniewicz, a local nerd who Johnny bosses around. During his escapades, he frequently runs into the supernatural inadvertently. Jurassic Park, 1993. When natural disasters and industrial sabotage leads to a catastrophic shutdown of the park's power facilities and security precautions, a small group of visitors and Hammond's grandchildren struggle to survive and escape the perilous island filled with now de-extinct dinosaurs. The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask, 2000. Romani is a young girl that lives with her older sister Cremia on Romani Ranch. When Link meets her, she tells him that she's been practicing for the arrival of they, or them, ghost-like creatures that appear like the Flatwoods Monster that come to the ranch and steal their cows every year as the Carnival of Time approaches. Cremia doesn't believe her, so she and Link have to fend off the ranch the first night until dawn to save the cows. Should they fail, Romani is abducted and returns the following day, lobotomized. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? 1969. Brainiac Velma, Jock Fred, Fashionista Daphne, Hippie Shaggy, and Shaggy's high-strung, talkative Great Dane, Scooby-Doo, climb into their green van, the Mystery Machine, and hit the road in search of weird phenomena to solve. Although, when Scooby and the gang aren't actively searching for them, mysteries just have a way of falling into their laps. Ruh-roh. Signs, 2002. Farmer Graham Hess's world outlook is altered when he discovers a message, an intricate pattern of circles and lines carved into his crops. As he investigates the unfolding mystery, what he finds will forever alter the lives of his brother and children. Geist, the Sin Eaters. Beetlejuice, 1988. After Barbara and Adam Maitland die in a car accident, they find themselves stuck haunting their country residence, unable to leave the house. When the unbearable Dietzes and teenage daughter Lydia buy the home, the Maitlands attempt to scare them away without any success. Their efforts attract Beetlejuice, a rambunctious spirit whose help quickly becomes dangerous for the Maitlands and innocent Lydia. Danny Phantom, 2004 to 2007. Danny Phantom is a teenage boy who, after an accident with an unpredictable portal between the human world and the ghost zone, becomes a human-ghost hybrid and takes on the task of saving his town and the world from subsequent ghost attacks using an evolving variety of supernatural powers. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, 2001 to 2007. After Billy, a completely idiotic and happy-go-lucky boy, and Mandy, a cynical, intelligent, and merciless girl, cheat at a limbo match against Grim, a Jamaican-accented reaper, to save the life of Billy's pet hamster, Mr. Snuggles. Grim is enslaved in a permanently unwanted friendship with the children. The Haunting of Hill House, 2018. Flashing between past and present, a fractured family confronts haunting memories of their old home and the terrifying events that drove them from it. Paranorman, 2012. Young Norman Babcock has the ability to speak with the dead, and he often prefers their company to that of the living. Norman receives word from his strange uncle Prendergast that a centuries-old witch curse on their town is real and about to come true, and that Norman is the only one that can stop it. The Ring, 2002. Rachel Keller is a journalist investigating a videotape that may have killed 4 teenagers, including her niece. An urban legend surrounds this tape. After watching it, the viewer will die in 7 days. If the legend is correct, Rachel will have to run against time to save both her sons and her own life. The Sixth Sense, 1999. Young Cole Sear is haunted by a dark secret. He is visited by ghosts. He is too afraid to tell anyone about his anguish, except child psychologist Dr. Malcolm Crowe. As Dr. Crowe tries to uncover the truth about Cole's supernatural abilities, it quickly turns unexplainable. Mummy: The Curse. Mummies Alive, 1997. In ancient Egypt, an evil sorcerer named Scarab kills the pharaoh's son, Prince Rapses, to become immortal. Entombed alive for his crime, Scarab revives in the modern world and begins his search for Rapses' reincarnation, a boy named Presley Carnarvon who lives in San Francisco. Rapses' bodyguards, Jackal, Wrath, Armon, and Nefertina, along with Rapses' cat, Kati, awake from the dead to protect him. The Mummy Returns, 2001. 8 peaceful years after Imhotep's first reincarnation in The Mummy, 1999, Pharaoh Seti's evil high priest comes back from the dead once more to disrupt the easy family life of the O'Connells and their 8-year-old son, Alex. As if that weren't enough, yet another destructive force, the ancient warlord, the Scorpion King, breathes again. Under Wraps, 1997. 3 12-year-old children, Amy, Marshall, and Gilbert, encounter a mummy who has been undiscovered for 3,000 years. While investigating, they accidentally revive him, but he must be returned to his resting place by midnight on Halloween, or he will never find his long-lost love. Demon: The Descent. Codename Kids Next Door, 1998 to 2008. The delightful children from down the lane are the conceited secondary antagonists of the series, bent on the destruction of the Kids Next Door organization and the supremacy of adults over children. They speak in synchronization and stand together in group formation in answer to Father, who usually sends other villains to carry out his work and rarely attacks the KND himself. I also want to do a special shout out to Horace in our Discord for reminding me of this one. I really enjoy this one a lot. My Life as a Teenage Robot, 1999 to 2009. The series revolves around Jenny Wakeman, a sensitive high schooler who also happens to be a state-of-the-art robot called XJ9. Desire to do what she wants, be a normal girl and spend time with her friends, instead of what she was created to do, stop the planet from certain disaster. Steins Gate, 2009. Set in 2010 in Akihabara, Tokyo, it follows Rentaro Okabe, a self-proclaimed mad scientist who runs the Future Gadget Laboratory in an apartment together with his friends, Mayuri Shina and Itaru Daru Hashida. Terminator 2: Judgment Day, 1991. Young John Connor is the key to civilization's victory over a future robot uprising and is the current target of a Terminator sent from the future to kill him, the shape-shifting T-1000. Another Terminator, the revamped T-800, has been sent back to protect the boy. As John and his mother, Sarah Connor, go on the run with the T-800, the boy forms an unexpected bond with the robot. Beast the Primordial. A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. Several Midwestern teenagers fall prey to Freddy Krueger, a disfigured, midnight mangler who preys on the teenagers in their dreams, which in turn kills them in reality. After investigating the phenomenon, Nancy begins to suspect that a dark secret kept by her and her friend's parents may be the key to unraveling the mystery. The Babadook, 2014. A single mother, plagued by the violent death of her husband, battles with her son's fear of a monster lurking in the house, but soon discovers a sinister presence all around her. It. The Losers Club. 7 young outcasts that live in Derry, Maine, are about to face their worst nightmare. An ancient, shape-shifting evil that emerges from the sewer every 27 years to prey on the town's children. Banding together over the course of one horrifying summer, the friends must overcome their own personal fears to battle the murderous, bloodthirsty clown known as Pennywise. Once defeated, Pennywise returns 27 years later to terrorize the town once again. Now adults, the childhood friends have long since gone their separate ways, but when people start disappearing, Mike Hanlon calls the others home for one final stand. The Nightmare Before Christmas, 1993. Oogie Boogie is the infamous boogeyman, depicted as a bug-filled burlap sack with a love for gambling. Oogie lives on the outskirts of Halloween Town in a casino-like lair under the treehouse of his child henchmen, Lock, Shock, and Barrel. Silent Hill 3, 2003. Heather Mason is a teenager who awakens from a nightmare in a shopping mall and tries to return home to her father. She navigates environments that oscillate between reality and a bloodier, supernatural version of it, the other world. Deviant, the Renegades. Akira, 1988. In 1988, the Japanese government drops an atomic bomb on Tokyo after ESP experiments on children go awry. In 2019, 31 years after the nuking of the city, Kaneda, a bike gang leader, tries to save his friend Tetsuo from a secret government project. He battles anti-government activists, greedy politicians, irresponsible scientists, and a powerful military leader until Tetsuo's supernatural powers suddenly manifest. Psychonauts, 2005. Rasputin, Raz, is a young boy gifted with psychic abilities who runs away from the circus to try to sneak into a summer camp for those with similar powers to become a psychodon, a spy with psychic abilities. Once there, he finds that there's a sinister plot occurring at the camp that only he can stop. Stranger Things, 2016. In 1980s Indiana, a group of young friends witness supernatural forces and secret government exploits. As they search for answers, the children unravel a series of extraordinary mysteries. Street Sharks, 1994 to 1996. Ripster, Jab, Streaks, and Slamu, 4 teenage boys turned sharks hybrid, must protect their reputations and change the way they're being viewed in Fission City. They must fight Dr. Paranoid, the scientist that transformed them, and his hybridized minions, as well as find their father once and for all. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In New York, mysterious radioactive ooze has mutated 4 sewer turtles into talking, upright walking, crime-fighting ninjas. The intrepid heroes, Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, and Leonardo, are trained in the ninjutsu arts by their rat sensei and mentor, Splinter. When a villainous rogue ninja, who is a former pupil of Splinter, arrives and spreads lawlessness throughout the city, it's up to the turtles to stop him. Nick's Storytelling Spotlight. Higurashi, When They Cry. A mature show steeped in mystery, Higurashi tells the story of a group of friends living in Hinamizawa, a rural village held captive by a cruel, bloody legacy. For the past 4 years, on the night of the Watsunagashi, the cotton drifting festival, a series of mysterious deaths have occurred. In each case, one person is brutally murdered and one disappears without a trace. These serial murders have been attributed to the wrath of Hinamizawa's patron god and became known as Oyashiro-sama's curse. The story of Higurashi takes place during the time of the 5th Watsunagashi since these events began. So, I'm going to go a little hard in the paint here. Higurashi is my favorite anime of all time, and it is one that I highly advise if you are interested in running a much darker Innocence game, that you use it as incredible inspiration. It's one that I always try to push to people who love horror. However, I will say this, is it's very mature, and there are scenes in there that make people extremely uncomfortable, especially in the first season. Mature as in gore. Mature. Nothing of the sexual kind whatsoever, but it's very graphic in terms of gore in certain situations. And if you think that's brutal, the manga is 10 times worse. Every line in Chronicles of Darkness you can distill Higurashi into. It is my favorite universal example. And the thing is I'm kind of lightly dancing around the story right now. And the reason why is because I don't want to reveal anything. It's that good where you uncover the mystery episode to episode. It's incredible for inspiration. And if anyone else tells you to watch this and they're into Chronicles, it came from me. I'll tell you right now, it came from me. No one else ever talks about this, but it's something that's incredibly inspiring as a storyteller to watch how this show develops. I highly recommend it. Conclusion. So, that's the guide to World of Darkness Innocence. As you can probably tell, I actually really enjoy this book, and it's one that I often pull out when I'm making younger characters almost immediately. Even though on the surface, it's really intended for creating characters ages 7 to 12, I often pull it out for every character age 17 and below, as it helps frame the reference of the character's perspective better for me, even if I'm using the Chronicles of Darkness core character sheet. The merits in this book allow that extra bit of customization I want, and I actually genuinely enjoy the character progression this book places at the forefront. That is something, in my time doing this, have witnessed kind of gets left at the wayside, as people care more about stats than story, and character progression and story ought to be at the absolute forefront of every role player. Even though this book is decently received, the reason why it's never mentioned at the forefront is due to the time period of its release. It is never considered a must-have as a first book to get into the line because it's something people don't really think about. Something that I haven't really placed into my guides before is dates, but they are absolutely crucial in the case of World of Darkness Innocence. We're looking back at this book in 2021, when it was initially released in 2008. Think about how much media has changed since then in all the examples I stated, and how much more releases have been implemented, such as 100 the Vigil, Demon the Descent, and Deviant the Renegades, that would greatly contribute to making these types of sessions. By the time media was churning out these nostalgia movies and films like Stranger Things, Chronicles has already moved on to 2nd edition, leaving Innocence in the dust in the process. Nobody really wanted to play these types of characters back then. But now, with how everything's going, I would be hard-pressed if we don't hear anything about a rules update to Innocence when Deviant the Renegades is fully realized and released. That's my opinion on it, and I really feel like it ought to be done because, again, the case of child characters and horror is absolute. This has been Nick from the Botch Pit. Thank you.